Open the with us, please.
Please bow your heads. God, we come before you today and ask for your wisdom in our deliberations. Please hear our thoughts and prayers. In your name, amen.
Thanks, sir. Just to give you an idea of how we're going to handle this today, Senator Bethel will finish up his remarks that he started last time, and then we'll open it up to the floor for comments, and we'll divide it equally unless there's a preponderance of one side or the other. I would like to get everybody heard if I possibly can. So I'm going to hush and turn it over to the Senator.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you recognizing which senator you wanted to hear. I have told many people that it's one of my goals to live long enough to tell people that I served with Senator John Kennedy and have them not be sure which one. But he's a great addition to our team on our side. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Tarvin. In the interest of time, and I know there's folks who want to be heard, I would just like to just briefly remind the committee what you've heard really over the last couple of years, but certainly in the hearing where most of these members were here and gave attention to Senate Bill 1, which I appreciate very much, and I appreciate the chair giving us another opportunity to be heard before this committee. Senate Bill 1, as I said in our first meeting, is not the solution. It's not the end of our dealing with autism in Georgia, but it is a big step. It is a right step, and I believe it should be the next step in Georgia. This is a condition which the CDC tells us 1 in 68 children born in the United States will be diagnosed somewhere on the autism spectrum. In Georgia, that number appears to be closer to 1 in 64. The diagnosis rates for boys are more prevalent than for young girls, and the diagnosis rates in some minority communities, particularly the African American community, seem to be higher. This is a public health crisis which is unfolding in and around all of our communities on a daily basis. Children who have unremediated or untreated autism, when that is a possibility, are more likely to be a part of our juvenile justice system, our criminal justice system when they reach adulthood, and our adult mental health system for the entirety of their life. Thankfully, advances in healthcare delivery and services have brought ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis model of treatment. It is practiced and delivered here at the Marcus Center and throughout Georgia and really around the country with significant success rates. There are individuals who are on the autism spectrum who will not be substantially helped or improved by this therapy, but there are a large number who will be. We ask in Senate Bill 1 that if a product is marketed in Georgia as health insurance, that it provide coverage for this condition, which is more prevalent than the rate of childhood diabetes, childhood cancer, and childhood HIV and AIDS combined. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about the cost associated with this. I want to address that the national average of the over 30 states who have a requirement is 36 cents per member per month. That's $4.32 per member per year. We have put in what we believe, although there's been significant action in the last few weeks even in other states, but what we believe is the most conservative model in terms of restrictions in what we're requiring, so that our cap for benefits is the most limited. Our age cap is the most limited. We believe that with those limits, the number will be closer to 26 cents per member per month. Now, members of the committee, I submit to you, without having the actuarial data here at hand, that if any of us believed it was okay to sell insurance in Georgia that didn't provide cancer coverage for children, it's just unthinkable that it didn't provide diabetes coverage for children. It'd be unthinkable. If it didn't provide coverage for HIV and AIDS for children, it'd be unthinkable. And friends, each of those, to the best of my knowledge, has a higher than 36 cents per member per month cost to plans in Georgia. Plans that are unregulated by ERISA, but only by the state of Georgia. We are asking that this body do what it can do, and I think what it should do. We cannot regulate, as has been pointed out, and it is a fair criticism. We cannot regulate ERISA plans. That's true of every bill that we've sent your way and every bill that you've sent our way during this session. And going back for, I don't remember what year ERISA was planned. I want to say 71, but I'm not positive. That number's in my head. We can't regulate those. So if that criticism is valid, then we should never pass health insurance legislation in Georgia, because nothing we pass will ever touch an ERISA plan until Congress changes that rule. So cost is a consideration, and it's a real one, and it hits Georgians and Georgia businesses just like yours and mine. And yes, the scope of the coverage is a consideration. But what we're asking with SB 1 is to take a substantial step which clearly captures between 15 and 17% of our population and makes this available to them in ways that it's not today. It opens the pipeline for ERISA plans in ways that we discussed in the previous meeting, but briefly just to point out that when a plan is piggybacking, so to speak, on a third-party administrator's policy or their network, they are generally offered a plan that is part of what's baked in the marketplace, and then you pay as a self-insured employer for deviations from that plan. So here's what we'll provide your employees, and here's the network, and here's the policy. If you want to change that, those administrative changes generally cost the employer to change. So if we are saying, we are leading by example, if we are saying this is important in Georgia, we're going to provide this coverage, it's going to be part of what we guarantee to folks who buy our regulated insurance. You can't sell health insurance that doesn't cover these basic things and call it health insurance in Georgia. Then there's a piggyback effect for those ERISA plans that we can't regulate directly. Mr. Chairman, that's the crux of what we're trying to accomplish. I think we've heard the technical aspects of the bill. I'm glad to answer questions on the sort of the philosophy and the direction or the technical aspects, but I know there's folks here who would like to be heard, and they probably are far more eloquent than I.
Does anyone on the committee have a question? Okay.
Just for clarification, you said 15 to 70% of our population, is that families? That'd be 1.7 million people.
That's correct. If you look at the industry data is sort of frankly scattered, Representative Tarvin, but if you look at the population of Georgia and you look at the lives covered by self-insured plans, covered by essentially welfare plans, government-provided plans, and then you get to the private insurance market, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It looks like all the questions from committee members. We'll invite those up who want to speak now in favor of it. But before you leave, I know there's somebody in the audience we want to introduce. Commissioner Hudgens, you want to raise your hand back there? Insurance Commissioner. So welcome. And
he's been busy. He's across the way in our committee just moments ago, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Try to make sure good legislation moves.
Mr. Chairman, would you like for me to remain here or move wherever you'd like me to be?
whatever you'd like to do. You can sit there because we've got 5 or 6 who want to speak in favor of this piece of legislation and 4 who are opposed. And they're not opposed to autism treatment, they're just opposed to mandates.
I understand.
So, all right, children's health care, Jamelia and Dr. Call. Might have to bring one more chair up.
You got it.
those who are testifying for and against this bill, when you sit down, please identify who you are, who you represent, and we'll go from there. And looks like each group will have about 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jamila Pope, and I'm here with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and the Marcus Autism Center. Marcus Autism Center became a part of Children's System in 2008. It is one of 3 autism centers of excellence in the U.S., and our center has one focus: kids, keeping kids safe, healthy, and at their medical best. That is what our frontline folks at Children's and Marcus strive to do each and every day. Today I have one of those frontline folks here with me, Dr. Nate Call, who is the director of our Severe Behavior Unit at Marcus. Should you have any questions regarding treatment or protocols, I know he would be delighted to answer them. Autism impacts every group and race. It does not discriminate. We saw more than 5,000 kids last year at Marcus Autism Center, and we see kids from each and every county in Georgia. We looked at this insurance committee and the districts that each of you represent, and during the last 3 years of this issue being considered, we had 54,269 visits by the patients in your districts. I know that some of you have some specific concerns over this legislation, and I want to try to address some of those. First, let's talk about the impact and cost of autism. The lifetime cost of a child with autism in the U.S. is approximately $3.2 million in medical and non-medical costs. 90% of those costs will be in adult services. That is 3 times more expensive than the costs associated with early intervention. Educating a child in a general education classroom is approximately $6,000 per year. A child in a special education classroom will cost an additional $12,000 a year. But with early intensive intervention, the kind of behavior treatment that this bill would cover, children with autism can attain intellectual, academic, communication, social, and daily living skills within the normal range. This means that many will be able to move from that special education classroom to a general education classroom, thus saving the state thousands of dollars per year per child. So that's a look at some of the costs that can be associated with a child who does not receive treatment. But what about the cost in terms of providing this type of insurance coverage, the cost that the opposition of this legislation wants you to fear? Here is what we know. In states that have passed similar legislation, costs have not been what was predicted, even by the state's own studies. In Missouri, autism-related costs have accounted for just 0.2% of total claims, leading the Missouri Department of Insurance to report that the legislation would have no appreciable impact on premiums. It is worth noting that the Missouri law, enacted in 2010, is much more broad than Senate Bill 1, covering children through age 18 with a $43,000 a year cap. Claims data spanning multiple years and in multiple states with similar coverage have shown the average premium impact, as Chairman Bethel has said, to be only 32 cents per member per month. The fear of the cost argument is simply unfounded based on what has occurred in 38 other states. Now it's 39. We had one more state just last week. The next few details are some things that members of the opposition tend to sometimes inaccurately portray. The behavioral treatment in this bill is not already offered and or available in these small group plans. You may hear from others here today that the autism services are already covered by insurance, and that is at best half true. The diagnosis of autism is covered. Some plans do offer speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy, and while that therapy is very much needed, and it is often used to treat the symptoms of the disorder, it is certainly not the type of behavioral treatment we are talking about in this bill. Behavioral treatment, specifically the medically supervised applied behavioral analysis treatment in this legislation, is not something that is or could be covered by school systems. Some school systems do employ ABA tactics to help individual students meet their IEP goals. And this is a good thing that it's happening in some school settings, but it's very different from the clinical ABA treatment, the kind that Dr. Call provides, that would be covered by this legislation. I've heard some say that this issue should be studied some more, and this issue has been well studied across the country. 39 states, which is 5 more since we were talking about this issue last year, have passed some version of insurance reform legislation. In the states that have studied the cost impact, it has never been what was predicted, and in many cases it's been far less. And to my knowledge, no legislation has been repealed, and in many cases the laws have been expanded. This is not a new issue for Georgia. This issue has been being considered for 7 years, and what you have before you is a bill that has adhered to the General Assembly's own process. It addresses the concerns that were raised by members of the Georgia legislature. It addresses the concerns that have been raised by Georgia businesses. Finally, there's also been discussion about why we should require these state-regulated plans to provide such coverage when the ERISA plans are not required. This can certainly be raised as an issue, but the fact of the matter is tough choices, right choices, and the best economic choices must be made. The state has no ability to regulate these ERISA plans, but the state has the responsibility to properly regulate the non-self-insured plans. Failure to properly regulate these plans leaves the door open to a burden that is placed on Georgia families. It lets Georgia taxpayers down, it lets Georgia teachers down, the school systems, and yes, it lets Georgia businesses down. Passing SB 1 is a financially responsible decision. And I'd like to ask Dr. Call if he could talk with you just a little bit about what he actually sees on a daily basis in terms of a child coming into the Marcus Autism Center who hasn't received treatment.
Thank you, Jamelyn. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I hope to today provide just a little bit of context to what autism is, what its effects are, what treatment for autism looks like, and hopefully that can answer some questions that I frequently get. Autism is a genetic-based disorder that affects the neurological development of a child at its very earliest stages of development. We really are only just now beginning to understand just how early these effects take place. But we know that in typically developing children, a child as young as 2 months responds to stimuli like their mother's voice, their mother's face, and they will orient and show preference to those stimuli. What we also know is that children who go on to develop an autism spectrum disorder don't show those same signs or to the same degree. And this is an indicator that at the earliest ages that we can detect these types of behaviors and these types of symptoms, these children are different. And one of the ways in which they differ from other kids is that they seem to value attention and interactions, social stimuli, differently or not to the same degree. Now think about that for just one moment, how that might affect a developing infant. If a child that young doesn't find the same value in interactions with a caregiver, a mother, for example, they're not going to attend to those same kind of interactions that a child relies upon to learn about the social world, to learn about what life is like being a member of our world. And as a result of that, they might attend to other things. And so you see some of these kids go on to develop symptoms like repetitive behavior, body rocking, hand flapping, things like this that are these repetitive behaviors that seem to be stimulatory and really taking the place of the types of interactions that come from interacting with another human being. You don't learn language in the same way, which is a characteristic that is very typical of individuals who go on to develop autism spectrum disorder. And that's a critical skill. If you can't communicate with other people in your life the things that you want and need and value, then that becomes very problematic. These are the kids who then go on to develop symptoms like problem behaviors, for example, because they learn other ways to work with their environment to produce the preferred outcomes, things that they do care about. And so these are the types of symptoms that we can see. We know this is a genetic disorder as well. It's a medically diagnosable genetic disorder. We know that because if you have one child with an autism spectrum disorder and then have a second child, that child is 5 times more likely to have an autism spectrum disorder themselves. So this is something that is early on. It's part of the earliest developmental stages, and it goes on to have profound effects on children. Now, the prevalence of this disorder has been mentioned here today. That number has been steadily coming down, or that has been increasing in prevalence. So we heard at one point 1 in 150 in 2002. That number has come down now to 1 in 68 and 1 in 64 in the state of Georgia. We also have seen those numbers increase in specific populations. In Black and Hispanic populations, for example, we've seen that number increase 91% and 100%. I'm often asked, why are those numbers going up? Why is the prevalence increasing? The CDC has done some great work in this area and shown that most likely the greatest contributor to that increase has to do with detection. That the better tools that allow us to assess at younger ages are getting a cohort of children diagnosed that previously were not. That greater awareness is having more and more people going to their physicians and to other folks who are able to do that diagnostic work. And as a result, we're detecting autism at younger ages and more accurately. And as a result of that, those numbers are going up. Unfortunately, what we also know about autism spectrum disorder is that, first of all, treatment can be effective, but if treatment is not delivered, the effects can be profound. Jamila mentioned some of the work that I do at the Marcus Autism Center treating severe behaviors. I see children who, at ages of 8, 9, 10, or older, engage in such significant problem behavior that caregivers have to consider terminating parental rights because they can't keep their child safe. I've seen a child who's had to have his eye reinserted because he keeps poking it out. Things that are horrific that no parent should have to deal with, should have to try to figure out, how am I going to get services for that child? Children that are so aggressive that they can't remain in the home in some cases. And these are the children who are not receiving intervention at the youngest ages. We know from the research. There's 40 years worth of research. One of the things you may hear from the opposition here today is that this is an experimental treatment, that applied behavior analysis is too new. It's not something we know enough about. We need more research. There have been over 60 years worth of research that have demonstrated that applied behavior analysis can have the kinds of effects that we need to have in order for these children to go on and be successful, for them to remain in their homes, for them to have less intensive, less expensive educational opportunities, to stay out of juvenile justice, to be less of an expense for the society and be able to contribute in meaningful ways. And so this is not an experimental treatment. The earliest clinical trials for this research, or for this treatment, occurred in the 80s. So this is not something that is experimental. We know that these treatments can have profound effects. Many of these treatments are delivered by myself and my colleagues at the Marcus Autism Center. And yet we know that if these treatments don't occur when these children are young, that they do not have the same kind of effect. And so in order to be as successful as they can be, it is important that they occur at the youngest possible ages. And I believe that that's how this bill was written, to emphasize intervention at the youngest ages when those children are most able to benefit from those treatments. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I sit here, you can't see my view. I sit here and I'm looking, I see a seal sitting right in front of me. It says wisdom, justice, moderation. And I really feel that this bill meets every one of those criteria. This bill, it has wisdom behind it in that we're trying to do something that is for the best benefit of the state of Georgia. I understand I oftentimes work with kids and I'm supposed to advocate for the individual child, but I understand that you also have to look at what's good for Georgia, all of the children in Georgia. And I think that this bill passes muster with respect to wisdom. Justice, this is absolutely the right thing to do. Moderation, you think about what's being done in other states. This is a relatively conservative bill. And again, I'm not necessarily the person writing this legislation, but I am someone who looks at what's going on amongst my colleagues in other states and the type of work that they're able to do and the types of treatments they're able to provide in other states. And I know that this is, by many standards, a pretty conservative bill, and yet I feel like it's an important first step. So I thank you for your time and attention to this matter today.
One comment. Be sure that you limit your comments to 5 minutes, because the last 4 of this group now has 15 minutes between them. Mr. Tarvin.
For clarification, you said if your first child has autism, second child what now? Say it again.
So there have been a couple of large studies that have looked at in an entire population, where they've assessed an entire population, that if you have a child who is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and then have a second child, that child is 5 times more likely to develop autism. So that second child
goes to 1 in 13.6 or something like that?
Roughly, yeah. I don't have that math. I know it's 1 in, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
18.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming to testify and for the great work that you folks do there at the Marcus Autism Center. My question: we talk about the autism spectrum, and we all know folks who are on various levels of that spectrum. Is there any data that suggests how many patients may be across that spectrum, more toward the more severe end, more toward the less severe end? Is there any data that suggests what those numbers might be?
I don't have those exact numbers, I'm afraid, but what I can tell you is that over the last handful of years, larger and larger proportion is being allocated to the higher functioning end of the continuum. That in the earliest days of the diagnosis, the majority of individuals who are being diagnosed were at the lower end of the continuum. And I think that that reflects an overall understanding of the syndrome, as well as tools for detection. I mean, some cases are pretty blatant, if you will, right? That the symptoms are very clear cut, and that as detection has gotten better, as awareness has increased, and as our ability to make diagnoses has improved, symptoms that would otherwise maybe go undiagnosed can be detected in individuals who are higher functioning or at the higher end of the continuum.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Looks like that's all the questions. Next would be Autism Speaks.
And Mr. Chairman, we appreciate all the time that you have given to reviewing this issue over the last year, and we are very appreciative of the hearing here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Callie Michael with Southern Strategy Group. I represent Autism Speaks. Autism Speaks is the world's leading research and advocacy organization for autism. We very much support Senate Bill 1, and thank you for this hearing. I have with me Anna Bullard, who many of you have met. Anna is Ava's mother, and I'd like for her to share her and Ava's story.
Chairman Smith, I will work to be brief.
Okay, good.
I hear you. Thank you for the hearing. Many of you I've spoke to, and I appreciate all of your time. You know, my daughter Ava is in that category. She was diagnosed very early at 2 years old. She had no language. She had no skills. She had no ability to communicate her wants or needs. And of course, we knew something was wrong. We did not know what. We don't have anybody in our family with autism. And so we took her to the developmental ped, and of course they said, yes, she has autism, and you need to go get applied behavior analysis. And so we found out very quickly our insurance didn't cover that, but like most of you, if you have children, and there's a treatment out there that has a 50% success rate, that's pretty high. And I'm willing to take my chances, you know, no matter what that is. So I'm saying, okay, we'll pay the money, because if there's a 50% chance that my daughter can enter first grade, unassisted, regular ed with her peers, I'm going to give her that shot. And guess what? She made it. She did it. She entered first grade, unassisted. She has friends. She's in 5th grade now, top of her class, scored the highest on the CRCT. And you know what she said she wants to do when she grows up? We live in Lyons, Georgia, so if any of you are from a small town, you know. She said she wants to buy her own land. That's a Georgia girl right there. And she wants to own a fashion store in Lyons, Georgia. Now, my daddy is in construction, and so she did say to him, I want Big Daddy to build it. so she's a smart girl. But Ava is an example of the potential. And I will say, I get asked all the time, why? Why are there so many kids diagnosed? And I will tell you, that's a very valid question, and something I think all of us parents want to know. But in the meantime, we can't just wait. We can't just sit with our kids here and say, you know, we don't know why, and let's figure out why. I think that that's important, but I will tell you, having a child, the most important thing is that she can speak. That she can say mama, that she can tell me what she wants, that she can tell me what she doesn't want. That is what is important. So I just wanted to say that she is a story of 1,000 stories in this state. And I just want to introduce to you Preston, who is in the back. I don't know if you could see Preston. Preston is 3 years old. Can Preston wave? Preston is 3 years old, and Preston was diagnosed with autism at 18 months, which is fantastic, and that is just huge kudos to his mom, okay, because that is not very usual. 18 months he was diagnosed, prescribed ABA, and his dad works for a law firm here in Atlanta in the private market, 250 employees, no treatment. They pay out of pocket $36,000 a year. He's 3 years old, and he can speak now, and he's making progress. If you pass the bill, Preston will have coverage, because I get asked, who will this affect? And I don't have 1,000 faces for you, but I do have one. And, you know, my motto in life is one. I live for the one that I can change. And so I just wanted to bring him so you can see a face of who you can change. I know you have all the data. We do have that in the private market is about 2 million lives. Of those 2 million lives, there's probably around 8,000 affected by autism. I don't know how many are under 6. So for the autism families that are here today, this compromise bill, it's not easy to swallow, but they're so appreciative. And I would bet that most of these families here won't be affected by the bill, but they still come and sit because we believe in the potential of autism. And we believe in the AVAs out there. And so we're so thankful for you and your time, and we thank you for consideration for a vote on this issue. We're very appreciative. And any questions, I'll take.
Okay, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Greg Morris. I'm going to have to remind the House member 5 minutes. Huh? Yeah. And Senator Tommy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll be brief because I don't know very much. I'll be the least informative witness that you have on either side of this issue. If you are in the legislature like I've been, this will be 17 years. Many of you have been, more, and some close. You'll learn things that you never hoped to know, and there's subjects you'll find things out about that you never hoped to know. I spent a lot of time this year, and thank you all. I think everybody in this group voted for HB 17, the Child Predator Act. I learned more about child sexual abuse than I ever wanted to know. Over the course of this past year, I've spent some time. I found myself as a legislator, and I would caution all of us, when we spend time with people just like us, I don't learn very much. I spent some time this past year with an organization, Family Connection, at home. It's very active. Ms. Bullard was very instrumental in getting it started, and there's people carrying it on. In the course of these meetings, I met families that had some real issues, among others, and a lot of them was autism. And what I found is that I've lived a very insulated life. I've been so fortunate. Our family has not dealt with autism. But there's desperation out there that I believe that we can help. Now, and I don't think we're here because nobody wants to help children. I understand the committee's dilemma. We have competing interests in this state. We have a lot of things that we have to consider. The economy of the state. Was a small businessman. I came up here, I remember when I ran for office, thinking my sole purpose was to get rid of workers' compensation. As a businessman, I despise those two words. Well, I probably said more shit, but anyway, as a small businessman, I relate to small business, and I understand, what you want. What I want to offer you is my help, whatever it could be, to help perfect the bill, so that we can get a bill. If there are issues that the committee has that I can spend with you trying to address, I just want to help, day or night, to get a bill. It's like I told somebody, my wife and children at home, and I don't have a girlfriend, so all I got to do is work, day or night, to help this committee and folks to come up with a bill that balances the interest of our economy and our small business people, but at the same time gives hope to people who are pretty close to giving up on having hope. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I introduced this bill 6 years ago when Ava was just diagnosed. Ava happens to be my great niece. And I could tell you all kinds of stories, family stories about how we all thought she was going to be in special ed for the rest of her life until we figured out there was a cure, and there is a cure. For half of these kids, they can be back on grade level. And by the way, their parents are paying the premium for this insurance. Now, I want you to just think about your role just a minute. Your role is not to keep mandates from passing this committee. Your role is to determine what makes a good policy. Just forget the word mandate a minute. Think about what makes a good policy. Now, if you let the insurance companies draft the bill, and this is not negative for them, they would not put as much in the bill as probably somebody else would. Somebody else may cover everything. But here's what you have to decide. Is autism an epidemic enough and out of the person who's paying the premiums control, like cancer or like polio? Has autism reached that level that you have to decide a good policy needs to cover autism? I will tell you, every policy that's sold and every policy I buy, and I've been buying insurance policies for my employees for 35 years, I'm just not looking for the best price. I'm looking for a quality policy. I want my folks to be covered if their children have autism, and you're the ones who are going to make that decision. I would just tell you, as legislators, forget the word mandate and think about your role in making for a good policy for that person that's paying that premium out there, that they're not buying a pig in a poke. They're buying something that's worth something. And autism, I will tell you, you'll hear about the financials, but autism ought to be in the policy.
Any questions for any committee members? Okay.
Yeah, 28. Senator, let me ask you something. When you passed this bill or passed the Senate, what caps did you have in it on the initial bill? Do you remember?
I think it's the same caps we had, a certain 35,000.
It was 30.
Age 6 or
the original bill.
Oh yeah, we were going for a lot more. It's come down every year. We're covering.
Yeah, the original bill I think was 50.
Yeah, and I think we had either kids up to 18 years old. And then we brought it down to 6 years old. The other part I would just tell you. You're perfecting something to make for a better policy. But in that policy is something that can take a child who will never talk to being a productive citizen. And the parent is paying the premium.
Further question, if I could,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Let me ask you this, Senator. If we brought the cap down, I know Senator Golden worked on this last year before he retired. If we brought it down, how much of a hardship would that be if we amended this?
Down to what?
20,000.
Some kids will never use as much as you get, and some that are more profound may use the cap. I don't know what the right number is. At this point in time, it's been 6 years. I'm anxious to get a bill passed that this is not Medicaid. We've got this in our state health benefit plan. If your kids had autism, they'd be covered.
Yeah. Further question, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman. I know you're emotionally involved with it, and rightfully so. I just remember health insurance used to have a cap on mental health. Commissioner, does it still have a cap on it?
That's not in my department.
Used to have 5,000. It does not?
I would say this.
Through the new health, okay.
I would say this. Who are you saving money by capping it? You're not saving the state any money because you're actually helping the state by getting kids off the welfare rolls and off the Social Security and in the school.
So you're adamant about
No,
35,000.
I'm not saying I'm adamant. I am adamant, but I'm willing. It's not my bill anymore. Charlie's carrying the bill.
Yeah.
But that is not a big number. After about a year, Ava was, had 1,000 words, and probably didn't need the maximum coverage after that. I think you probably need at least the 35,000 to get you through the first year, and then you plan based on success you're having.
Further question,
I'm
further
not
comment. Senator, my issue, I think a lot of us have the issue, is the mandate back on the employer. And of course, I know you're an employer as well, but I've seen these numbers continue to escalate. When we first did this, they were talking about 20.
There's a lot of good cost analysis out there. We even have our own cost analysis in the state health benefit plan.
Yes.
It's not expensive. Listen,
I hear you.
You make the decision whether it's a good policy or not. If we had an epidemic of polio, would you put that in there? It's the same thing, except this affects more than polio. In polio, you can still function. This, you can't speak. Get beyond the mandate.
Let me add one thing, and you're not just talking about the kid that can't function. This is the other thing I've learned. You're talking about parents that can't function, because when you've got a severely autistic kid, I mean, your life is already, it appears to me by observation, every minute of your day is accounted for one way or the other. You're not thinking about vacations. You're not thinking about jobs oftentimes. You're just thinking about trying to handle on a day-to-day that child. So it's not only the future of the child, which is important enough, it's the parents and grandparents who so much of their time is taken up when it could be in more productive times if that child was able to function on their own. You're not just freeing up the child. Oftentimes, in my experience, you're freeing up parents, grandparents, and aunts and uncles.
Okay, that appears to be all the questions from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Well, we've got time for one more, and you'll have about 2 minutes, and then we'll have the those who are opposed to mandates. Who's next is Randall Grayson.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving me 2 minutes, because following all those people, I can never say everything that they've said. I'm not here representing anybody other than my daughter, who's 13 and has been diagnosed with autism. I have been a volunteer for a number of organizations. I'm a lawyer in private practice here in Atlanta. I've been a member of the Autism Society, Autism Speaks, the Georgia Council of Developmental Disabilities, and I'm a current member of the Human Rights Council for the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. And I was involved with the law for the last 7 years. And in my private practice, I am an employment and employee benefits lawyer. So with the 2 minutes that I would like to tell you, first of all, I've been involved in drafting this law from the beginning. We've worked with scientists, community members, representatives, politicians, everybody. I believe this law has been well thought out, well drafted, and has been a conscious effort to try and take into consideration all of the views from all of the community of people who are interested in autism. And I believe that you cannot get a better law. I could answer any question anybody could ask about the history or the meaning of any word or any clause in the law, and I'd be happy to do that if anybody has a question. As an employee benefits lawyer, I just want to say one thing. I worked on a lot of self-funded plans when I was a young associate, and I get questions from employers all the time about compliance issues. One question I never get, I never have an employer call me up and say, how can I find a way to deny medically necessary care to the children of my employees? They are worried about costs, but the more often than not, the cost question becomes, how can I provide this care that I know that my employees need in a way that is not too costly, and that I believe is what this law does, and I believe that the evidence there adamantly supports that. I will say I've watched this law for the last 6-7 years. We tried to address every single question. We tried to address every single thing. I believe that we put our money where our mouth is in this bill. There's if any insurance company actually sees a cost increase, they get a waiver. I think that we know that this is a good bill, that this benefits the people of Georgia. It is a very carefully considered bill. I've been with it from the beginning. I tried to answer every single person's questions. I think I can answer any question that you have about technical details of the bill. I hope that it will finally get a vote. I hope that we'll finally get to see it on the floor and let the legislators vote their conscience on the bill. Thank you for your time.
I think you have a couple of questions, Representative Taylor.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've listened today, I have a couple things that have kind of cropped up in my mind I wanted to clarify. The $35,000 limitation. How would this put us out of compliance with federal regulations for ADA and equalization of the mental health that was passed several years ago in Congress? I feel like this could open us up to a future lawsuit because we have included a limitation in an area that federal law prohibits us to limit.
I believe that, well, first of all, this regulates state insurance plans, and you're asking somewhat of a technical question related to ERISA and how that applies. The Mental Health Parity Act may have implications for the cost limits. There's certainly ways that other plans have imposed cost limitations on both mental health treatments and other treatments like this, behavioral health treatments. I think that it's a doable situation. Whether or not the federal government agrees with me or agrees with you, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it violates the law as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, follow up.
Yes, ma'am.
That was my concern, that if we were to open this up, it could overnight become an unlimited, subject to the unlimited maximums. And also, I don't know that we have any numbers, but I would like to see so many percentages of benefit plans today are ERISA plans, and that's specifically excluded, and the exchange is excluded, and small group is excluded. How many people are we actually talking about? Do we know how many people are actually going to be touched by this law? It seems to me that we're excluding the largest participants in the healthcare industry.
Well, I think I will address that from my perspective. I think that Anna may have given you the numbers of the people in Georgia. As an employee benefits lawyer who worked on self-funded plans in my private practice, it is true what Senator Bethel said, which is that you start with a plan that is driven by the third-party administrators. In other words, the Aetnas and United Healthcares of the world start with a plan, and if you want to deviate from the plan, then you pay extra. So the self-funded plans follow the lead of what is in the states. So while I agree with you that from the legal perspective, that ERISA is a federal law and we can't do anything about that because that's part of the Constitution, the reality of it is that when we ever drafted a self-funded plan, we didn't start from scratch. We started with what Aetna or United Healthcare gave us, and they started with what the state mandates were. So one of the things that's important is 40 other states have now mandated this benefit. That is going to follow, that the self-funded plans will follow that lead. So the state of Georgia has the opportunity. Yes, you cannot touch those people directly because of federal law. However, by leading, you can reach those people indirectly.
If I could follow.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to speak directly to that, if I could, on both points of Representative Taylor's question, because it is important. And as I said, you can't do ERISA. If, for example, you wanted a bill that dealt with skin grafts, it can't touch an ERISA plan.
That's right.
But more to the point, Kaiser numbers show that is anywhere, and I've said 15 to 17% of the population. So as Ms. Bullard said, some numbers estimate that at about 2 million as a population of Georgia that is touched. But that's all we can ever touch. And so those things are specifically excluded because we can't touch them. If we did touch the federal exchange products, we would then open the state up to be at risk for the subsidy, which is why we haven't done that, because we can't touch that without putting a greater exposure or risk in play. I will point out to the issue of the mental health issues that I believe since we've in fact adjourned last sine die, Maryland, Nebraska, Utah, Washington, South Dakota, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Mississippi. I just hate being behind Mississippi at anything, so it's just hard for me to get that out there. And have all passed capped mandates, which will, once those governors, there's a couple that are still waiting on governor signatures who have given indication they intend to sign. I bring the total to 41 or 42. Plus U.S. Virgin Islands and non-states with this. But the point being, all of them have passed that in a post-ACA world, and all of them are administering that in a post-ACA world and are not encountering the problems that people have sort of, will it be unlimited? Will we go into that world? No one is having that problem. So my understanding from talking with attorneys who practice ACA law is that that's not going to be a problem. My obvious experience in the 40-plus states now who are in this world is that they don't think it's a problem and aren't experiencing that problem either.
May I follow up?
One brief one, because we've got 4 other people who want to speak.
Okay. Did all of the other 40 states, are they limiting it to like 35,000, or what were their?
It's various. It is all over the board. Our intention, and to speak to Representative Rogers' question earlier, and some of the folks who speak against have been good partners in this process. They have a philosophical objection to any mandate, and we understand that and respect it. We just disagree with it. I think Senator Williams said it well. If you're going to sell something and call it health insurance in Georgia, what do we require there to be in it? But Representative Rogers' question about that limit, when we went out and when Senator Golden, who preceded me in carrying this bill, went out, we looked for the lowest number, and that's where we started. So that's how we got there, was trying to be the most respectful and protective of our small businesses who are going to be bearing the burden.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got 4 that want to speak on this particular bill. We'll hold it, if you don't mind. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, one question for you. You're limited in time, so there's probably a lot you skipped over. How did you become involved with this bill originally? And I want to know if it would affect you, or how it affects you, at this point or moving forward.
Originally, as I said, I've been a volunteer for a number of different organizations, including the Autism Society. I'm a parent of a child with autism. I became involved with the bill the first time it was proposed. There was some concerns with the language of the bill, and because of my background, I was asked to essentially bring the community together to help create a bill to address the scientists who had concerns, to address the psychologists who had concerns, to address the parents who had concerns, to address the politicians. So originally, the second version of Ava's law was one that I had a role in helping the committee to craft in response to some of the political problems that had come in the first time. As far as this bill itself, I believe it's the right thing to do. My daughter is 13. She won't benefit directly from this plan, but that doesn't change the fact that it is the right thing to do for families of children with autism. I have been there. She was 3. She was 2. I know what it's like to have that diagnosis. I know what it's like to not know what to do. I know what it's like to be searching for an answer and want your insurance company to be there for you. So I know that.
Okay, thank you, sir. We've got Kyle Jackson, NFIB. Okay. Sorry, your time is running short.
It's quite all right, Mr. Chairman. Again, Kyle Jackson. I'm the state director for NFIB. We represent about 7,500 small employers here in the state of Georgia. Unfortunately, have to come today opposed to Senate Bill 1, but I want to recognize Senator Bethel for his willingness to listen to our concerns and to craft a better bill, certainly than where we started. As I said, I represent small employers, the vast majority of whom are in the small group or individual market, which this type of legislation applies to. And I will tell you that those folks, a lot of them, not all of them, are each year making the determination whether or not to carry forward with their employer-sponsored health insurance plans. You'll see I spared you the 7-page testimony I had for last time and only gave you 1 page this time, but you'll see in your folders a handout that diagrams costs going this way coverage going this way. And I'm not going to sit here and say today that if y'all pass Senate Bill 1 in whatever form, that the sky is going to fall and all small employers in the state of Georgia are going to drop their health insurance. But I can tell you that there is a cost to this, and that cost contributes to the cost from the Affordable Care Act, to the 40-plus other mandates we have. And at some point, small employers will be forced to make the decision, and some have, to drop their coverage altogether. So that's really our chief concern. Again, you talked about the ERISA issue. There's not much you can get at because of the self-insured companies, but small employers are competing against self-insured companies, and self-insured companies have a lot more buying power in the insurance marketplace than small companies. So our folks, would just respectfully ask for you to not pass this legislation. It's difficult already out there for the small employers to find affordable health insurance. And it just so happens our research foundation released a study today, in fact, that since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, 62% of our folks have seen premium increases, 8% have seen reductions, 10% have had their policies canceled altogether. So the marketplace isn't good now. We would ask for you to not make the marketplace even worse. And I would be happy to answer any questions if there are.
I don't see any lights on. Okay. David Rayner.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'm David Rayner with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. I come before you today to echo the concerns of my colleague, Mr. Jackson, with NFIB. The Georgia Chamber represents over 20,000 businesses statewide, and despite popular belief, the vast majority of those are, in fact, small business owners. We'd ask that you carefully consider the implications for SB 1 were you to take action moving forward. The Georgia Chamber has a longstanding position against government-imposed mandates on health insurance, most notably due to the fact that they do disproportionately impact health care affordability for small employers. We've heard from many of these employers over the years before this very committee that have threatened that they would have to discontinue providing health insurance for their employees or any additional mandates, even if it's $1 per member per month. Some of the folks are in that dire of a situation throughout our small business community that they may have to discontinue offering health insurance. I would ask the committee also to consider the cost data associated with the fact that the state health benefit plan has now started offering limited coverage for ABA therapy on the autism spectrum disorder. We have, as an organization, enjoyed a great working relationship with Chairman Bethel. I'd like to go on the record as thanking him today for doing his best to try to mitigate the negative impacts that this type of mandate could have on premiums. But we would ask that, again, you proceed very carefully as you continue to deliberate on this bill. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
One quick one, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Rayner, of the 20,000 members of the Georgia Chamber, how many companies have their own ERISA plans?
Oh, goodness, I'd have to get back with you on that information.
How many would you guess?
I would have to say between maybe 20-25%, but I'll get back with you on that information.
Okay.
I don't want to be misquoted.
So what size employers do you have? 50 or more
If
or
we're
less
more
than
on the
50?
small business, I'd say the vast majority outside of the metro Atlanta area would be probably under 100 employees.
Okay. Did you poll your members on this?
We have in the past, yes.
What
And
was the
actually,
poll?
our Small Business Advisory Council, which is a representative population of our small business owners in the state, have made this a top priority as far as future mandates on health insurance for small businesses. So,
One more. Yes. What was the poll data? Do you remember?
it was overwhelmingly, 80th percentile or higher.
Okay. Out of the how many responded?
Out of those, I would probably say we had roughly 200 or more.
Out of 20,000?
Of that small business population.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Graham Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Graham Thompson on behalf of the Georgia Association of Health Plans. We, too, want to say thank you to Chairman Bethel for having an open door during this discussion and working to limit the impact of the legislation. Mr. Chairman, we do rise today to oppose this legislation. Throughout this debate, and it's certainly been a multi-year debate, we've had 2 points of emphasis. One is employer parity. The state should not ask the private sector to cover what it does not cover for its own employees. And the cost. The costs do not seem to be unknown, though, because everybody agrees that there will be an increase and an impact on health insurance premiums. On the employer parity question, Mr. Chairman, certainly for this year, this plan year under the state health benefit plan, the state is covering for just over 600,000 members of the state health benefit plan ABA therapy. So this is a brand new benefit. We're not quite 90 days into that experiment, and as I understand the way that the utilization review works, DCH will be receiving from the 3 health insurance plans that are serving as vendors for the state health benefit plan that utilization data. So we may see that this stuff doesn't cost as much as we say it does, and certainly that'll be a brand new debate for next session. But that data will not be reported until late April or May. We'll see if this is an epidemic. Does the 1 in 64 children that are diagnosed seek treatment? And we'll see that because the state health benefit plan is statewide. We're going to see people receive coverage not just at the Marcus Institute, but in Valdosta, in Thomasville, in Dalton, Georgia. We're going to see people all across the state, and we'll see what those cost impacts are. To the cost question, Mr. Chairman, a mandate, an autism mandate, exists today on in the state statute. If you look at line 46 of the bill, it actually strikes the existing mandate that was passed in the 2001 legislative session. And so what does that mandate cover? It requires the health plans to cover diagnosis, physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy visits. But with any coverage or treatment, there is a limited number of visits. And what we do not cover is ABA therapy, and that's because we see it as educational, not medical. And that's obviously the center of this debate. That is not a perspective that is way out of the mainstream, though, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to cite a couple of folks that share that perspective. As we all know, in 2010, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, passed. And so that set off a really intense wave of lobbying from Autism Speaks and various other advocacy groups to say, hey, ABA therapy is an essential health benefit and should be covered as one of the 10 very broad service categories that go into each qualified health plan. Every plan sold after 2014 has to be a qualified health plan, and it has to cover essential health benefits. Well, after 4 years, even after this intense round of lobbying and certainly lots of conversations, the President's own health care organization, HHS or CMS, said ABA therapy is not an essential health benefit. So it's not an essential health benefit. This bill on line 23 says ABA therapy is not an essential health benefit and will not be covered on the exchange. Also, as you know, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this legislature set up the Mandate Review Commission. And so after a year of several meetings, which we participated in, the employer community participated in, your constituents and several of you, after a year of thoughtful debate looking at what does this stuff cost and what do we want to cover, they did not recommend passage of an ABA therapy mandate. So we wanted to stress that. Additionally, just this last week, I think you saw some comments in the press from Governor Deal talking about any sort of solution that would help meet some of these public sector challenges. Folks mentioned, keeping children out of special ed, keeping children out of juvenile justice, keeping folks off the welfare rolls. Governor Deal said we need a broad-based solution, that this is a fragmented solution or an insufficient solution. And so we agree, and we certainly want to partner in those conversations and work towards that solution. And so, Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, this isn't the health insurance community coming up here just saying, no, we don't want to cover ABA therapy. We listen to Georgia's self-employed and the small businesses. And they tell us they want increased flexibility and lower cost. This bill does not do that, and therefore we oppose it. Thank you, sir.
Any questions from anyone? Okay. No questions. Thank you, sir. Alan Hayes. We only have this meeting until 3 o'clock. So.
How much time does that give me, sir?
About 30 seconds.
I'll do it. Alan Hayes, representing America's Health Insurance Plans. I would like to echo many of the comments that Graham made and add that we at AHIP oppose mandates. They increase costs. They limit choice for our members or for our customers, and they and the number one issue for our customers as far as whether or not they take up a health insurance policy is cost. I would also like to say that, sadly, there is no cure for autism. And the fact is that ABA therapy is not a cure. And you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, the science is out there to study on this issue. I would say, again, this is not a autism mandate bill. It is a ABA therapy mandate bill. As Graham pointed out, there is already an autism mandate on the books in Georgia. The U.S. Department of Education, through the IDEA Act, requires states and with federal government to pay for educating children, any child with any disability, and that mandate is from birth through high school. And so what we hear loud and clear is that system does not work. That is failing some of our children with somewhere on the autism spectrum. But to shift that burden to small businesses and to individuals in their health insurance premiums from where the deficiency is in the education system seems like not a very good idea to me, that perhaps we should concentrate on fixing those problems in the system where it's already being addressed. I would also say, as to kind of back that up, I've been doing this for now, I think, 15 years, including my time at the insurance department. This is the first insurance bill I've ever seen that references the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And the reason they do that is because this is a benefit that they should be receiving at school. With that, I would say I'll answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay. I don't see any questions. All right. I guess we better go because they're starting to gather outside. All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank y'all.